So hi, I'm Jihad Tanggol. I'm part of the ICT Industry Development Bureau. First off, I'd really like to mention the Innovative Startup Act. It was really crucial in aligning all of our efforts between the ICT, the UST, and DTI, and gave us a general idea and that direction that we needed to develop our startup program. So in relation to that, we developed our DSDAP, or the Digital Startup Development and Acceleration Program for the ICT. So just briefly, here are the 5 components of the DSDAP that we are offering to startups all over the country. Of course, first up, we have been conducting startup ecosystem assessment and startup mapping activities since way back 2018. However, we want to strengthen that initiative for this year. We want to continue mapping cities and municipalities across the country, then to be able to produce specific roadmaps with interventions that we feel would be crucial in helping develop the startup ecosystem in the locality. So that's the first component of our DSDAP. Second component of DSDAP would be awareness projects. So there is a unwritten rule between DOST, DICT, and DTI that majority of early stage awareness activities would be done by the ICT. So we have been conducting awareness activities across the country in Metro Manila through webinars, conferences, and seminars on various topics, even discussing what are differences between a traditional business and startup, basics of pitching and validation. All of these things the DICT will cover through our awareness project. Next, actually for this year, we are planning to conduct the pilot acceleration project in coordination with an incubator. So what we are envisioning here in DICT is that we'll have a certain journey for startups, basically from identifying the gaps needed in the locality through our mapping, having awareness sessions, ongoing awareness sessions all year round, and then using the specific information we get from the mapping to produce customized acceleration projects in the regions. So there might be some similarities across, for example, the OST recede. However, there are ongoing discussions already to align and how to streamline our activities and have that one government approach. Last 2 components, of course, the main focus for today would be our Startup Grant Fund. I'll be going over in detail in a while. However, for our SGF, we've really patterned it to DOST Preserve as our benchmark for their conduct of SGF as they have been doing it for the past few years already successfully. And lastly, our Startup PH portal in coordination as well with DOST and DTI. This is being developed internally by DICT to be the central repository of all information. And hopefully in the future, this will be the central portal for applications to programs and benefits of all government agencies involved. So as I mentioned, this is the envisioned journey for a startup by DICT, from the ecosystem mapping to awareness projects to acceleration projects. And then hopefully we'll be feeding off the acceleration projects and having them apply to our startup grant funds. Now, for the Philippine Startup Challenge, this is one of our flagship activities, the ICT, in relation to startups. Basically, our goal here is to change the mindset of students across the country, having that entrepreneurial mindset from the traditional worker mindset. So for our target outcomes in the PSC, we are targeting aspiring startup founders from ideation to minimum viable product stage. And also through the PSC, we would like to foster that culture of mentorship across our participants in our list of mentors. I'd also like to mention that through the PSC, we've tried to improve and provide funding directly to students and to our professional category from last year. So in a previous iteration of the Philippine Startup Challenge, we've even worked together with UST, where they provided funding, prototype funding for our top 5 winners. while for last year's version of the Philippine Startup Challenge professional category, they would be the first beneficiaries of the DICT Startup Grant Fund once it's formally launched. Now, just briefly for our acceleration program, as I mentioned, these are supposed to be made using our roadmap developed through our startup ecosystem mapping. So this will be customized, and this will involve a few things. These are not set in stone, but hopefully this can cover a few things: learning sessions and workshops, assistance to business registration, mentorships, use of office space, as well as free legal consultation and all of the things listed here. Now, for the Philippine Startup Portal, basically we have already now finished the phase one or the informational. The phase two, the transactional is actually up and running and it's ongoing at the moment. So registration to the PSDP is available here, and there are already efforts to populate the website with more information and to develop further modules as stipulated by the law. Now, for the last part, which is our startup grant fund, basically you've heard from DOST and DTI, and for DICT, we really want to help bridge that gap for early stage funding. So this is where DICT will come in. And we envision it together that hopefully through the DICT Startup Grant Fund, this will be another layer of security for investors. And hopefully this can be a pipeline towards further funding through the OST and DTI. So hopefully we can be able to do that starting from the ICT up to the OST and up to DTI. Now for our DICT Startup Grant Fund, for full or partial subsidies, successful applications shall receive a grant amount ranging from 500,000 to 1 million pesos. So it's very minimal compared to the OST and DTI. However, our target audience naman, we feel that this would be a good amount to start with. And of course, due to our limited budget as well, fortunately. Through the SGF as well, the benefits via mentoring and coaching through our partners who have demonstrated expertise in their respective fields, and then access to wider networks as well. Now, for the DICT SGF, we have two categories. Number one would be proof of concept to prototype, and then the next one would be prototype to minimum viable product. For the eligibility requirements, I haven't listed down everything, but just some key points. For the proposed project, there should be no duplication with ongoing programs or projects. It should meet all criteria in the evaluating proposal as stipulated in our guidelines, and that proponents are allowed one grant at a time. So if you are currently applying for the OST, if you are an ongoing proponent of the OST and DTI, you will not be able to apply for the ICT. For startups naman, company owners must not have any accountabilities with the ICT or even the OST and DTI, and any administrative or criminal case. So these are some of the usual stipulations. There should be no relations by consanguinity or affinity. And this one is a key difference now with the DOSTs. All proponents must be eligible, may be eligible to apply regardless of the date of incorporation or registration. So I mean, dito, we are willing to take that risk to bridge that chasm for early stage funding. So we are not expecting kasi the early stage startups to be registered already for a year or two. So it's part of our application process, assisting them and guiding them for the business registration as well. So this is our current screening process. We are envisioning it to be first off, of course, there would be a table review for our bureau. So it's going to be a 1-week review for checking of eligibility and initial shortlisting. And then they would be endorsed to our technical evaluation committee for a 2-week review. There would be a pitching and Q&A session with various industry leaders here. and various technical personnel that we have tapped, no, to be able to assess all of the grants fairly. So after the assessment, there would be an endorsement to our GC or our grants committee. So there would be another batch of pitching and Q&A session. There would be an evaluation and checking of the preparedness for the availment of grant. So all of the financials, it would be part of our grants committee as well. So our internal director for finance would also be part of the grants committee. So this is the current DICT SGF process. So from application to grant administration and implementation up until the closing, the liquidation part, and then potential linking to investors. And lastly, I'd like to mention lang no, that as I mentioned earlier, actually we haven't launched yet our Startup Grant Fund. We have conducted our public consultation last March 10, 2022, and we have been going over our guidelines, having it reviewed and approved by various offices, COA, legal, all of this. And we are only missing one step, basically, which is the issuance of our department circular by our Office of the Secretary. So once we have that, we plan to have a short launch or at least a blast, an official call for proposals in June. So this month, ideally. So these are the rest of the activities for the ICT SGF, which includes a right shop and whatever process that I mentioned earlier regarding the review and the assessment of the committees. So at least for this batch, for the first batch of the ICT, we hope to release the funds by October, assuming that we start by June. So yeah, I believe this is my last slide. So thank you very much, and thank you, Ms. Sam, for inviting us, even if we have not yet formally launched our DICT Startup Grant Fund.